and how values can change depending on the community that you are in.
First as a Black woman, and then as a defense attorney.
You care about defending.
They're cross-section because there's an obvious group of people, that distinct group that is missing.
That language that you should be using, because that's what the law says.
Currently, because of the overwhelming media coverage, any potential juror may have already formed an opinion about the case.
Good evening, members of the jury. I am Porsha Shaf'on. I am the Deputy Director of the Juror Project. Tonight, the Director, Will Snowden, will not be joining us, but we are happily joined by JoEllyn Jones, Esquire. We're going to be doing things a little different tonight. Into a jury duty unmasked, what I would like to do is things a little different. You know, each and every time the Juror Project goes out into the community, we like to educate the community on the importance of jury service, the importance of jury diversity, because we believe that an informed citizen is absolutely an informed juror. And that is why we do these jury duty unmasked every second Wednesday of every month. So for those of you members of the community that are already here, welcome. For those of you it's your first time, welcome, welcome, welcome. I am here with attorney, mom, sister, friend, just all around dope lady, Miss JoEllyn Jones. How are you doing?
I am great and so excited to be in this space tonight. When you asked me would I participate, I'm like, wow, this is pretty dope. I am a big fan of the Juror Project, everything Porsha, everything Will. So I'm happy to be in this space with you tonight.
I love that, sister friend. I love that, love that, love that. So, you know, some people in our audience may not know you. I know you. I know that what is your role at the NACDL again? And for those of you who don't know, the NACDL is the National Association of Criminal Defense Lawyers. Miss Jones, Mrs. Jones, tell us what thing you got going on with the NACDL.
Yeah, so I sit on the board of directors with NACDL. This is going into I just finished my second year, finishing up my second year on the board of directors. I also co-chair the diversity committee and the state action committee. So I'm co-chair of both of those committees. And I fill in wherever I need to fill in with NACDL. It was a family that I became a part of, and they just do great work over there, making sure that we are here advocating for rights and try to make our criminal legal system actually just. So we're out here fighting the good fight as much as we can.
I know that's right. And I know that is not all of what you do. So tell us a little bit more. You just opened up your own law firm. Tell me, and our audience members all about that.
Yes, so I was a PD for a number of years, and I currently even sit in a role as Seton Hall. I run a reentry project, but I have my own firm, and that kind of really came to the bout because one, I want to advocate in the way that I want to advocate. And don't get me wrong, public defenders' offices across the country are doing phenomenal work. They are advocating for clients. They are actually probably the first line of defense in many ways because a lot of people just can't. I said this to somebody the other day that representation is a benefit of the privilege in many cases, right? So if you have the money to pay for an attorney, you have the opportunity. So PD's offices are doing great work. But one of the reasons why I kind of started out on my own is because I wanted to be able to expand the work that I'm able to do. I want to be able to still offer good representation to people, and especially the people who fall between those gaps, right? They may make a little bit too much money to qualify for a PD, but they don't have enough money necessarily to go in for the traditional higher end, what they consider a higher end attorney. So I feel like I'm one of those, my office is one of those people that fills in the gaps for those individuals, right? So that we can be able to give them the great representation without necessarily always breaking the bank.
I love that. I love that. Now, one of the things that I noticed on the description for your firm, and that we're going to actually be talking about tonight, is you talk about restorative justice. Can you tell us a little bit about why your firm practices through that lens, but also a little bit about what is restorative justice?
All right. So restorative justice, or what it is a system in where punishment is not the center of the criminal legal system, but rather the center of the criminal legal system will be about healing the harm, right? To understand that when an offense happens, when something happens in society, there was usually some type of harm caused. And that harm may look different depending on the offense, right? So addiction causes harm in so many ways, right? It causes a breakdown of families, of parental child relationships, and relationships with other loved ones and family members. So, and relationships with yourself, right? So it talks about what is the harm that was caused, and instead of focusing on punishment, let's figure out ways we can try to help heal that harm, right? Because if we heal that harm, it's not only is a benefit from the person who caused the harm, but it's also a benefit to the person who was harmed themselves, right? Our current system focuses on punishment. We're going to punish this person. We're going to punish this person. We're going to punish this person. And nowhere does we talk about, okay, even if the punishment happens, how do we move past it, right? It doesn't focus on the aftermath. So for me and my firm, I want to be able to always look through things from a restorative lens. How can I help my client, one, in situations where accountability needs to be taken, but takes accountability for their actions, how are they able to move past it? How are they able to say, okay, listen, this action hurt somebody, whether it's a family member, a stranger, society as a whole, and how can I move past that where I'm not operating in a world where I'm harming anybody? So for me, that's important. And to me, it just makes sense, right? It makes sense. Like they say, hurt people, well, heal people, right? So
Right.
if I'm hurting, I'm going to continue to hurt people. And a system based on punishment is only inflicting more harm, right? It's not talking about healing. It's about inflicting more harm. So that's how I look at it and how I want to make it in my practice. But one of the reasons I got there was because I went through my own journey of restorative justice.
Before
When I
you get into that, right? Because I want to pause for a second, because I really do want to unpack that in a thoughtful and meaningful way, because I know that it is your personal story. But before we get into that, I want to pause for a second for the members of the jury, members of our community who are new here. For those of you that have not been to a Juror Project presentation or have heard me and Will talk, one of the things that we often talk about, in which JoEllyn also just talked about, was this conflation that we have of punishment and accountability. Often as a community, we conflate the two. And it is not by mistake, right? We are often socialized to believe that prison is the only way to hold people accountable. And oftentimes when Will and I are in the community and we're explaining to community members of city, as well as the community, our community's power to nullify, we always undoubtedly get this question of, well, cool, right? You want to open the doors, you want to let folks out, you believe that there are alternative ways to hold people accountable. And Will and I always bring up restorative justice as an alternative to incarceration. And so you have, both personally and professionally, an incredible story about restorative justice. So if you don't mind, to the extent that you are comfortable telling our community members, have at it.
All right. So when I was 18 and he was 19, my brother was killed. He was my best friend. We were only 14 months apart. It was 4 days after
I'm sorry.
Christmas. Thank you.
I'm
It
so
was 4
sorry.
days after. Thank you. It was 4 days after Christmas, and we had all the plans for the world. He had just graduated from high school in June, the June prior. So in June of 1998, he had just graduated. I was graduating in June of 1999, and we had all these ideals of what adulthood was going to look like for us. Even though it's ghetto now that I'm here, as a kid, as a young person, you couldn't look forward to becoming an adult, like going out into the world and taking over the world. Well, my brother didn't make it into 1999. On December 29th, 1998, his life was taken. And my feelings, my emotions ran the gamut of everything you could think of. I was angry. I was hurt. I was heartbroken. My best friend was now gone. It's a person who I thought that you, for lack of a better words, going to grow old with, right? You think that your siblings are going to be around forever. You may think at some point your parents may not be there. You may think some of your grandparents, maybe there are older individuals, but you never really think about a world in which your siblings don't exist with you, right? So I ran a gamut of emotions. My brother was buried on January 2nd. And on January 4th, we got a phone call that the person who took my brother's life was going to be turning himself in. And although I always saw myself in the role in the legal field, I used to think I was going to be a civil rights attorney. I wasn't really sure what that meant, but I thought that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to be a civil rights attorney.
Did you always know you were going to be?
Yes, since I was in second grade. I always tell people like second grade, Black history was very big in my family. So understanding who I was, where I came from was very big in my family. It was also big in the school district I went to. And every year we would do something for the MLK holiday. Our teacher had us make a shirt. And it said, I have a dream. And my dream was to be a lawyer. I drew what I consider, I guess, a lawyer holding a law book. And I had a dream in second grade that I was going to become an attorney. And that was because I knew that the law was a way to help get people's rights for the people who look like me. And that's what I saw. Like, I saw people fight to change the law. I saw people use the law in those ways. So I'm like, that's what I want to do. So I always wanted to be an attorney. But once my brother died and I was thrusted into the world of the legal system and hearings and pleas and talking to prosecutors, and nothing about this system seemed right to me. Like, I was actually turned off by it. Like, none of this seemed right. Like, it didn't seem fair. It didn't even seem fair for Ryan, who was the person who was charged with my brother's death. But I was so angry at him that none of it just seemed right. Like, I didn't like it. And I lost my passion for a little bit and wanting to do that. And then time progressed and I still went on my legal journey and went to school and graduated and became an attorney. And at some point, Ryan, how would you say? Go ahead.
Can I just pause you for 1 second? Mm-hmm. I don't mean to interrupt, but one of the things that I wanted to ask you was, before we lose it, or before I lose my train of thought, more important, what was it about the system that didn't seem fair to you at that time? You talked about it not being fair to him. You talked about it not feeling fair to you. Can you remember, because I know it was a long time ago, but can you remember what were some of the things that felt unfair?
I felt like nobody really wanted to hear the story. Nobody really wanted to hear about my brother. The state had already created a narrative of what happened the night my brother was killed without talking to people. I remember just thinking and hearing prosecutors say things, and I'm like, well, that's not true, or that's not accurate, right? And at the same time, I knew nothing about Ryan's story. Ryan and my brother didn't know each other. And I was trying to figure out, like, how did we end up in this moment in time, right, where he pulled a trigger that took my brother's life? And I felt like nobody was really saying things. Rumors were flying around. The state had held on to what they wanted to hold on to. There were articles going out in the paper that they were allegedly getting information from whoever they were getting information from, and none of it was accurate. None of it seemed right. None of it seemed to make any sense to me. And I remember when Ryan was turning himself in, before he was turning himself in, they were supposed to meet, the prosecutor's office was supposed to meet with my mom. And they called her and was like, they had to reschedule. And then my mom got a phone call from somebody else that said, hey, we heard the suspect, we didn't know who Ryan was turning himself in. And my mom, I remember my mom sitting there, she called back the prosecutor's office and was like, this is what I heard. And because of this is what I heard, I need you to come in and meet with me. Don't try to ignore me. And I remember her sitting there and they started talking about bail and doing certain things. And this is, I remember one point they told her, like, this is the highest bail we ever set in Cumberland County. And my mom looked at them and was like, you never killed my son before in Cumberland County either. And I just remember thinking, like, she didn't get a chance to get her voice heard. And I remember her going to, she said that she would go in, they would allow her to come in, like, review discovery, but they would put her in a room, a dark room with very little light. So none of this seemed to be a system that really cared about how we felt. And it was crazy to the point where I remember they used to refer my mom to like victims witness stuff. And she was like, I don't really trust anything that y'all send me to. Like, I don't trust any referrals to therapy. And she was trying to figure out, like, how do I get my daughter therapy? Because she knew I was angry. She knew I was hurting. And she was like, but I don't trust anything that you all are sending me to because it doesn't seem right. It doesn't seem legit. So it just didn't seem like the system even cared about my brother or how we felt as loved ones of a victim. So I just wasn't feeling it. Like, it completely turned. And then I would sit and watch how I just felt like Ryan's attorney just didn't seem like he was advocating for him. It didn't seem like he was fighting. Because I remember thinking that I just don't want anybody, like, you're not going to just say this person did it and that's the end of it. Like, I need to make sure that whoever was accountable, because like I said, we didn't know who it was and we didn't know Ryan. We needed to make sure the right people were going to be held accountable. So it just didn't, nothing about it made me felt good or comforted or healed in any way, shape, or form.
And you still decided to engage in this process, in this field, and on the right side.
Yes.
What led you to this? Like, you experienced that loss, and for those of us in community that have experienced loss of a loved one as well, right? For those, and I think we can all identify with your anger, your frustration, but I think the other interesting piece about this is when we're oftentimes thinking about community harm, right? And again, it goes back to the lies our teachers told us, right? And absolutely not an affront to teachers, but we are literally socialized to fall in line, right? We're often not socialized to question. We're told that this is the criminal legal system that we have, and this is the criminal legal system that we have to work with. And we're not often taught, one, about jury nullification, about restorative justice, right? And when your family experienced harm, it sounds like the system that we have also didn't show up for your family. So not for Ryan and not for your family. So what made you continue on to the path of becoming an attorney, a criminal defense attorney, defending people that cause the community harm, just like the one that your family experienced?
So honestly, I still, when I got my passion again for the law, or to do this work, it really had the fact that I still wanted to be a civil rights attorney. Like, I was exposed to like the Southern Poverty Law Center and all these people doing work. And I was like, I'm going to go and I'm going to be a civil rights attorney still. And in fact, I was like, I'm going to go work for the Southern Poverty Law Center. And then for a moment, I was like, it's in Alabama. I don't know if Alabama is the place that I want to go and live, right? So I'm like, I got to do something. So while in law school, when I finally got to law school and I decided to work. I interned with the Office of the Public Defender. So I started interning, and I was actually not even in a legal capacity. I was in a life skills capacity. So I basically would assist clients with finding resources, whether it's treatment or counseling or something else that kind of deal with more of that holistic approach of representation. So I got this position through I don't know, it was like a grant that they had, and I was working, and I didn't work that many hours, but I really enjoyed it. And while I was there, I sat and watched the lawyers in court, and I watched the lawyers advocate. And what I realized is that defense attorneys do care about justice, and they care about families, and they care about communities, and they care about sitting on the side of what is right, right? And they are here to preserve people's rights, especially for those who historically have been disenfranchised, historically's rights have been kind of trampled upon, and they're here to do that. And then my thought was, I thought about my passion and how I have a dream t-shirt, and thought about it that I would be the person representing MLK. Right. That's the role that I will want to be. Right. I will want to be on the right side of justice. Right. All the many times that our civil rights leaders were being locked up, and the freedom fighters and people in the Panthers, and they needed somebody, I will be the person who's representing them from a system that is trying to take them down, right? We would be on the side of representing the Angela Davises of the world, right? I didn't want to be on the side of prosecuting the Angela Davises of the world. So I thought about that, and I was like, okay, I need to be that voice. And my grandma used to say, you never walk into a courtroom without your voice, right? And without your mouthpiece. And I wanted to be the mouthpiece. So that's kind of how I say, you know what? Defense is the side for me. This is where I need to be. This is where my passion is.
So glad you're here with us. So glad you're here with us. You talked a few minutes ago about you losing your passion and then it being reignited. Was it at OPD that your passion was reignited, or was there some specific life event that happened that reignited your passion?
Yeah, it was just when I started and I was exposed to different things, and I just was like, I want to make a difference. I want to be an advocate, right? I want to be there advocating for, like I said, people, primarily people, be honest, a lot of people who look like me, right? People who have been marginalized and who haven't had an opportunity to have somebody voicing and celebrating for them and advocating for them in the courtroom. So that's kind of where my passion kind of got reunited. Like, it was like, people need voices, right? People need voices. And I was watching it. And when you sit and watch, recently we've had a number of cases. We've had that we see on the news and have been highlighted. And you're thinking like, well, how did they get to that? Like, how was that? How was that the result of that? So it's like, how can I help change that system, at least one case at a time, one person at a time? And that's just kind of where it was like, listen, if I can just help somebody, right, along that way, you know, you can push something forward. Why not? Let's go for it. Let's do it.
I love that. For those of you that are just joining us, tonight we are Sans Will, but we are plus Miss JoEllyn Jones. And we are so glad she's here. We have been talking about restorative justice and what our system can look like as an alternative to incarceration. For our new members, our new community members, members of the jury, for those of you that have attended presentations with me and Will, you know that we talk a lot about jury nullification. And oftentimes when we go into communities and we talk to people about their power to nullify, and when people hear about this power, right? The right to reject the law, if we disagree with it, if we find it immoral, right? We have that power. Quite frankly, if you ask me, we have a duty to reject anything that we find unjust. For those of you who have been watching the news lately, I hope it's not lost on you that our system is not going to save us, that we have to, or that we should be thinking about saving ourselves. In any event, JoEllyn was just talking to us, one, about the path that she's taken to become the phenom defense attorney that she is, but she also talked to us about loss, about how her brother was murdered and what the criminal legal process was like for her and her family prior to her becoming a defense attorney. I want to switch gears a little bit because I do know your story, and I do know the ebbs and flows and ebbs that you've gone through. But one thing that I wanna shift to is there's gonna come a point in your life where the tragedy that struck your family, excuse me, I can't speak. The tragedy that struck your family kind of resurfaces. It circles back, right? And can you tell us a little bit about that?
So Ryan eventually pled guilty. So he didn't even go to trial. He pled guilty in the death of my brother, and he was sentenced to 20 years. And in New Jersey, he had to do 85% of the time. So
How did your family feel about that?
So it was a lot. It was kind of heartbreaking in a lot of ways. And one of the reasons is that Ryan actually pled right before he went to trial. So we had already planned for trial, right? So in our mind, Ryan was going to go to trial, and we were going to have to go through that. And then we get all of a sudden, after the state saying, this is a case, this is what's going to happen, and they try to convince you to buy into the way the system is and justice is going to be served. And all of a sudden it's like, we opted to offer him a plea. So it is, from a victim standpoint, it's kind of like a punch in the stomach with the current system. Because it's like, yes, we're advocating for you. And then it's like, oh no, although we told you we had this phenomenal case, we're going to plea it out for less. And based on my thought process at the time, based on my understanding, it just didn't seem right. Like, are you serious? Like, and I actually was fine with going to trial and him not being convicted rather than, because my thought was, at least at that point, the story could be told, or hopefully my brother's voice could be heard, right? Would his voice get a chance to be heard in a trial? At least that's how I thought about it at the time. I don't necessarily think about it 100% that way now, but at the time I thought was, and if the state can't prove his case, maybe they got it wrong. Maybe he's not the person who took my brother's life, right? Or maybe it's not the circumstances in which the state said my brother's life was taken, right? So let it play out. Like, our system is designed to let it play out. So let it play out.
So I have two follow-up questions to that. So my first question is, was your mother and other close family members, did they sort of have this same train of thought?
So I feel like my mother had a way different train of thought than me, period. Like, I think she was fine with allowing things throw out. Other family members were like, we want his head on a stake. And to be honest, I probably wasn't necessarily far from that at times in my life, but, and it's really weird. I tell people all the time, personally, I wanted pain to come to Ryan. But I also, at the same time, didn't believe that that was the role of the criminal legal system. The role of the criminal legal system was to allow Ryan to have his day in court and a jury to make a decision. My personal vendetta with him was separate from what I thought the legal system should have been designed to do, right? Like, the legal system was designed to, it's supposed to be designed where people have their day in court, and a jury makes a decision based on what they hear. And at that point, whatever comes after that, whether that's a not guilty, whether that's a guilty verdict, but that's how it was designed. My anger was a personal feeling. And I didn't necessarily think that there was a a role for that, right? To be honest, the system is supposed to design to save Ryan from my anger, right? To make sure that he's protected from how angry that I was. So I have family members to this day who are all over every gamut of it. But when I tell you that my mother is the pinnacle of love and faith and justice, my desire to fight for equality and equity has stemmed from her, and watching her do that in so many aspects of her life, and her aspect as a social worker, of me hearing stories of how she had, yes, social worker, and how she was involved in race riots, and how I watched her the night my brother died pick up his friends from the ground and comfort them, and how I watched her walking to my brother's funeral with my father, they were not together, and made sure that he was a part of that, and how she told people that his friends wanted to sit in the back of the church because they were his family. When I tell you that I was raised by one of the best, and I'm in all of her, and when I became a mother, I became even more in all of her, and how much class and dignity she held it down when my brother passed, that I don't know how she did it. Like, I honestly don't know how she did it. And I love watching her. And if I am just a slight sliver of what she is, I feel like I'm a good person. So
you're an amazing person, and shout out to your mom.
Thank you.
I hope she sees this. Shout out to your mama. I do have a second follow-up question, which is, you mentioned a few times that your brother's voice was missing in the room. Can you tell me a little bit about what was missing?
Just the essence of who he was. So my brother probably was also one of the kindest spirits I knew, right? And he operated with a level of compassion that I didn't have, right? And I say this not lightly, but people thought, like, dang, somebody probably would have hurt JoEllyn before they hurt RJ, because he just was not a vengeful or angry person, right? He probably, yes, he would have forgave Ryan long before I would have, right? He loved his friends just because they were his friends. He brought so much love and compassion to the world. So he wouldn't have wanted a system based just on punishment. And it's so hard to say that, yes, I wanted punishment because I was hurting, but my brother wasn't that person. About right after my brother graduated, he had went to another graduation, and it was actually Ryan's graduation. He didn't know Ryan, and some people that Ryan had affiliated with jumped my brother after graduation. After their high school graduation, they jumped him, and I had went home by then. And he came in the house, laid in my bed, and was like, "I just got jumped." Like, he said it so casually, and like, I'm jumping up, heated, like I'm ready, like, "Who jumped you?" Da 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 da. And I'm like ready to pop off, and he was like, "I'm good." And he was just so nonchalant about it. And I'm like, "Boy, you got jumped." Like, he just was like, "It's okay. I'm fine." And I was like, "Well, where are your friends?" He was like, "Nah, it's good." Like, he just was so forgiving, so calm, so collective about it. So I felt like they never got to see that part of him, right? They assumed things about who he was that just weren't true. And his love, his forgiveness, his voice. And nobody ever really, and I know we're gonna get to that part of the story, but nobody really ever asked about his voice until after Ryan came back on appeal, on a post-conviction relief. Nobody really ever got a chance to say, "Tell me about RJ. Tell me about what kind of person he was. Tell me about what do you think he will want in this situation." Right. Like I said, what he would have wanted was probably completely different what I would have wanted. And I would acknowledge that. Like, he just was, his level of love and compassion and genuine just forgiveness for humanity was so much different than even mine. And that voice never got a chance to be heard. Nobody got a chance to really get to know him.
Absolutely. I feel that. And thank you so much for introducing your brother to us. We get to hear about him tonight. So thank you so much for sharing those parts of him with us. For members of the jury that are just joining us, JoEllyn Jones is a phenom defense attorney in New Jersey. She's just opened up her law practice, but a huge part of the work she does is steeped in restorative justice. And I want to pause briefly and talk about the interplay between jury nullification and restorative justice, right? When Will and I go into the community, and Will is educating the community on the importance of jury service, on the importance of jury diversity, juror pay, and not have and allowing folks who have previously been convicted of felonies to serve on juries. You know, I walk in a little while later talking to community members about their power to nullify. And for those of you that have not been to a presentation, jury nullification essentially means that the prosecutor has done their job, but the jury rejects the law and they decide to acquit the accused. So again, that means that the prosecutor has proven every single element of every single crime. They've done their job, but the community members reject it. And juries often nullify for several reasons. One, because they disagree with the law generally, because they disagree with the law in this particular case, or because they want to send a message to police, to prosecutors, to judges, how they want to be prosecuted, if at all. And undoubtedly, after we do one of these presentations, there's always at least one or two community members who will come up to us and say, okay, well, you're talking to us about opening up the prisons and letting people out. What is the alternative? And for those of you that have been on the call the entire time, you've heard Ms. Jones talk about what restorative justice can look like in real time. And we're going to continue on that journey with Ms. Jones. For those of you that are just tuning in, Ms. Jones's brother was murdered many years ago. And we've had the opportunity to hear her story, to hear about her brother, to hear about how her family handled the tragedy in the past. But I want to talk about, and you started to get to Ryan coming home. And I'd love to know what happens after Ryan comes home, if anything.
Yeah, so Ryan came home. Actually, and he came home earlier than expected because his sentence was reduced. He did a post-conviction relief, and they renegotiated. And the state actually didn't fight his post-conviction relief. They actually agreed to a reduction in sentence. Ryan agreed to that and eventually was allowed to come home. And so he gets home, and before he got home, we were actually noticed as the family members of the victim. So we got a call that says this inmate is being released in so many days, And then we got a call that said this inmate has been released from the Department of Corrections. And we live in a small town, so small enough where it's almost inevitable that I probably would see him. So a little time passed, and I actually ran into Ryan the first time going to see my grandmother. She was in a rehab, and I saw him. And by this time, I'm an attorney. I am the mother of my daughter, who my brother was named Robert R.J. Jones. My daughter is named R.J. I'm walking into the nursing home with my daughter, and I kind of stop in my tracks, and Ryan walks past me, and my daughter looked at me and was like, "Mom, who was that man?" Because she could tell I was kind of staring at him. And I say to her, "That was the man who killed your uncle." And she kind of just looked and was like, "Oh." And then a little while later, I saw him, and I remember the date. It was May 1st of 2015. And I remember the date because it was my daughter's best friend's 10th birthday. And we were going out to dinner for my daughter's best friend's birthday. And we're walking into Applebee's, and Ryan's walking out of Applebee's. And I turn around and I go up to him, and he says, I woke up to him and was like, do you know who I am? I said, excuse me. I said, do you know who I am? Before he could say anything, he looked at me and says, he doesn't get a chance to say it. I say to him, I am RJ's sister. I didn't even say I was JoEllyn. I said I'm RJ's sister. And I hear my daughter's best friend's mom in the background saying, who's that man your mom's talking to? And my daughter says, that's the man who killed my uncle. And her best friend's mom says, oh, excuse my language, because I'm actually says, oh shit. And I was like, and I guess nobody knew what was going to happen in that moment, right? And Ryan kind of was like, I don't know if you know. And the next things that came out of my mouth was like, I think we should work together. And I remember thinking in that moment, like, I should work with him. That's not what I've been practicing to say to him for the last 15 years. I need to cuss him out. I need to do all these things that I thought was a proper way to handle that. But initially, we weren't able to work together. He was on parole, and part of his parole was not to have contact with me. So another system fix was to not allow him to have contact with me. And it was kind of weird. It was weird. So he wasn't supposed to have contact with me. And we waited a little while. And then he eventually wrote me on Instagram after he got, or Facebook after he got off of parole, and said we should meet. And we ended up meeting. And me, my mom, and Ryan met for breakfast one day, and we just talked. We talked about that night. We talked about our feelings. He apologized to us. And ever since then, Ryan and I have been working together. And I can't say I knew it was restorative justice at the time. I didn't really have a name for it, but we also were talking about restorative justice and gun violence and the effects it has on our community. So it kind of was a situation where we decided that we thought that our story was more powerful and more impactful together rather than separately. And we thought that we can use our story to hopefully get people to, one, look at this system from a different viewpoint or vantage point, and also be able to use our story in a way that may help combat violence in our communities, right? So we talk to young people about what gun violence really looks like, right? That these 18 and 19-year-old young people, sometimes younger, they're not really killers, and that's not really what they want to do. So how do we make a change for that? So my mother actually started her restorative justice process before me.
So I just want to pause for our audience members who don't know. So we actually got a question in the chat, essentially wanting to know how JoEllyn's mom, or was JoEllyn's mom immediately interested in meeting Ryan, and what was that like for her?
So my mother actually started the process before me. And when I say that is, it happened, my mother went to Ryan's mother to talk to her. And Ryan's mother actually passed away before he was released. And I remember not understanding why my mom would do that. Like, I remember when she told me she did it, I didn't really kind of understand. And I didn't understand why she went to I didn't understand why she would go and talk to her. And my mom said to me that during the course of going to court, she knew she was a mother hurting, and she would look over to Ryan's mom and also saw another mother who was hurting. And she used that to go and communicate with Ryan's mom. So they sat and they talked and they cried and they had their moment. And Ryan's mom, like I said, sadly passed before he was released. So when I told my mom that I had reached out to Ryan, my mom was actually fine. And before the time we actually went to dinner or breakfast, before we actually sat and ate together, my mom and I were in the mall and we saw Ryan. He kind of walked past and I said to her, like, Mom, that's Ryan. And she walked over to him and she gave him a hug. And she actually told him, if you ever need a mother's hug, I'm here. So my mother.
Wow, your mom ain't nobody's joke.
Yeah, my mom ain't nobody's joke, yo. She's really that girl. They said she that girl. She is really that girl. So my mom kind of really got to that journey before me because she understood that. And subsequently now, she'll reach out to Ryan. When Ryan and I were just in North Dakota speaking, she texts me and it's like, tell Ryan that don't make me proud. She made him a wreath for his door on Christmas. He's married, and his wife, sometimes she works on holidays because she works in the medical field. And my mom will call him and be like, hey, do you want to come get a plate? He's been to our house. So yeah, she's actually got there before I even got there, and she got there and she stands on principle of how she is and greets him with nothing but love and compassion.
That is, I have a couple of follow-up questions to that, but we also had a question earlier that I don't want to forget about. And it's from Patty Ann 319. And Patty Ann asks, how do you think you can make a difference right now with the dismantling of so many civil rights? How would you respond to that?
Patty, I gotta pray about it. And I say that like joking,
Sure.
like not a joking, but like
day.
it's so many
Every
things that are coming at us step by step. And it's scary because it's not just the dismantling civil rights, but I feel like it is empowering certain mindsets that we have spent that people before us have spent the last 30 and 40 years, and that we continue to spend the time fighting against, right? So like these rights are being taken. People are saying, well, the rights are being taken. I don't have to acknowledge some of the things that I acknowledged before. So I would just say that one of the best ways to do it is to use our voices, and not just in platforms like this on social media, but every single one of us has some platform, some door that we're in, right? Some career choice that we're in. And we have to make sure that we're speaking up in every element that we can, right? It's not just limited to us in the legal field. And I think about, we look at the historical look of the civil rights movement, people did what they could do, right? It was students sitting at counters. It was people willing to boycott certain businesses. It was people using their right to vote. It was people using their bodies to protect people behind them. It was marches. It was a concentrated effort to dismantle things one step at a time. And I think that we need to go back to those foundational things. We need to remember that foundational. I always tell people what was unique about the Montgomery bus boycott wasn't that people just said, we're not going to ride the bus, but people strategized together. People were willing to carpool. They were willing to help people with their kids. People who are cab drivers were willing to be cab drivers at a discounted rate. It wasn't just, we're not riding the bus, but we had all these other things. People were meeting with, legislators. It was a concentrated effort. And that's one of the things that we have to get back to. We can't just say the job is just for attorneys. The job is just for legislators. The job is just for people in certain roles. This is all of our job to combat all of the things that we see that are going on currently now. We all have a role to do, and we saw that role. And it's not just a job of people of a certain age, right? The civil rights movement was ran by the youth, right? People who were young, like people like MLK and people like, they didn't make it to the age of 40, right before they were assessed. And so we have to remember that we need to all figure out, what can we do? What can we leverage? How can we organize? And we all just have to figure out what role can we play in our individual careers and our individual doors that we have open to us. So what can we do for that?
Absolutely. And we got a comment from another brilliant Black woman that I know, both a lawyer, community activist, educator, and all around dope human, Food and Revolution. And one of the things she talked about too is, how community mindsets and getting back to basics really reflects the indigenous practice of navigating conflict in community, right? Often facilitated by elders. So, thinking about, a non-carceral state, thinking about alternatives to incarceration, thinking about the fact that accountability does not have to look like a cage, right? And that was the reason why I asked you to come on. I think I've been trying to think about the word or the way to articulate how in awe I am of you and your mother, and your family as a whole, and how even after, the tragedy and loss, like so many Black people, you get up every day, right, and fight for other people's sons, fathers, mothers, uncles, sisters, cousins, brothers, and I really am just in awe. Um, so today I know that you have your own law firm, and you and Ryan also go around the country. I think, where did y'all just come from? Oregon?
North Dakota. North Dakota.
All the same to me. Shout out
Yeah.
to y'all that live in those places. Hats off to you. What was that like? I'm out. You probably don't know if I'm asking about North Dakota or the experience of presenting with Ryan. So let me clarify both. What was that like as Black? No, I'm kidding. Tell me what it was like for you and Ryan to be presenting together.
So in general, presenting together is always interesting, because usually when we're in a space, some people don't know the backstory, what we're going to get up and talk about. So, or they hear restorative justice or forgiveness, and they don't know the depths. Nobody really expects me, especially when people know I'm coming from, they see the Esquire behind my name. They don't really know. So when they're hearing this personal story about me talking with and forgiving the person who took my brother's life, everybody's like, well, how did you do that? I don't know if I could do that, right? And I feel like you never know what you can do unless you're in that position and the opportunity presents itself. So it's definitely different when we're going to speak with people. And being in North Dakota was unique because, one, we're telling this story to a group of people, although they're defenders, they're not necessarily a room of people who look like us, right? So we're telling this story, and there's a lot of questions about, like, why did you have the gun in the first place? What did you do? And so we get those type of questions. But for the most part, a lot of people are receptive to what we have to say. And and I know we're going to be winding down our time a little bit short. The one thing I really definitely want to say is that people act like what we're doing is not accountability. I would tell you that if Ryan here was here today, and conversations him and I have had, is that one of the hardest things he has had to do was to sit in a room with me and my mom, especially after we had forgave him, right? To walk into a house and he sees pictures of my brother up, and he knows that he's responsible, and yet he still has my mom and I rooting for him and praying for him and talking to him, because we actually don't just talk about our speaking engagements. We have conversations about all kinds of things, right? About our lives, about what's going on, and doing different things. To be able to, he interacts with my daughter, right? And he interacts with my daughter. My daughter has never met her own uncle, right? Because of him. So to be honest, if you probably ask Ryan, he has had more accountability and had to face his actions in dealing with us than he did just sitting behind bars. So I think that in talking to groups and hearing that and letting people know that restorative justice doesn't mean that somebody's not being accountable for their actions. And in fact, it's a whole deeper level of accountability than you're ever going to get in the current system that we have.
I could not agree more. You know, when I was in law school, I studied ad hoc tribunals.
So, okay. Um, so yeah, like, and it's so weird. For me, I didn't have a name of what Ryan and I were doing. What for me, all I knew was that I needed to find a way to heal. And I needed to have answers for my brother's job. Like, so for me, I can't say I knew what restorative justice is. I actually found out about restorative justice later in the fact, and I ended up getting my master's from Vermont Law School in restorative justice. Because one day I was Googling stuff and I was like, oh, this actually exists. It's actually a thing, right? It's actually a name for this process that Ryan and I went through. And my thought was, I wish this process was offered to us previously, right? So I didn't even know this thing. I didn't know it had a name, right? I didn't know it was actually some terminology and something that people were doing. I just knew that I needed to heal. And I didn't know, and I needed that opportunity to heal and to grow. And so I was able, and ultimately, to kind of figure it out. Like I needed to be able to do it. And that process became healing. And I was thinking, like, why don't we do this more often? Like, why is this not the go-to, right? And it kind of reminds me, like, and when you talk about a sense of community, and another comment about community, it reminds me of that, like, you'll see stories of a kid acting up in the community. Maybe they go and do something to the neighbor's yard, and the mom drags them over to the neighbor's yard and says, now you have to go and cut Miss Da-da-da's grass because you did X, Y, and this. It was never about, now I'm taking you to the police station and locking you up and giving you a criminal record. It's now you have to fix the harm that you caused, right?
Come
And
on
you have
now,
to
and preach.
understand. And that's what we need to get back to doing. We need to be fixing that harm that we cause. And it's so weird that it just seems so natural, right? These things are innately natural, right? It's even like when you, as a parent, when your child makes a mistake, it's not about punishing the kid. You don't want to punish them. You want to correct their behavior so they don't make that same thing do. And you're usually doing it because you don't want them to hurt themselves or somebody else in the process. So restorative justice to me is actually innately more, yes, organic. It's more instinctive than it is opposite, right? And when we talk about it and we actually do it, it's like, this makes more sense, right? A system where you had two mothers who were hurting, who the system said, don't talk to the other family members. Don't engage with them. Know why? Because the system was designed. They don't want us to engage because they thought we wanted to hurt each other. And that's not the reality. My mom wanted to help another mother heal. She didn't want to hurt her. She wanted to help her heal.
I know that's right. We have another comment from Food and Revolution, always bringing us back where we supposed to be. I appreciate you, sis. And one of the things she said was, you know, your feelings, right? That instinct that you have, it shows how organic this instinct can be when we are seeking healing, right? When you were talking about leaning into restorative justice. Thank you so much, JoEllyn, for sharing both the incredibly personal pieces of yourself as well as your professional journey. We have another question for you, which is, did Ryan's incarceration itself, right, him being put in a cage, did it play any part in your healing process?
No. Honestly, it didn't. Like, I still miss my brother today. And when Ryan pled and when Ryan was locked up, I still had so many questions. I needed to know why my brother wasn't here. I needed to know why we didn't get a chance to grow old together. I didn't get a chance to have nieces and nephews from him. I needed to have answers to all that. And him being incarcerated answered none of those questions for me. It didn't help me at all.
Yes. Um, Someone really wants to write down what it is you said, which is you need to fix the harm that you cause. Because that is what accountability looks like. That's actually from Will Snowden, our deputy director, excuse me, our director, tuning in. Thank you, Will Snowden, for tuning in. We appreciate you. As we close out this episode of Jury Duty Unmasked, I want to thank you again for joining us. I want to thank you for sharing these important parts of yourself with us and showing us what restorative justice can look like in real time with a real person. So thank you. For those of you that have never joined us before, please tune in next month. We're here every second Wednesday of the month. We do also have a Carmelo Anthony video coming up, but we wanted to be thoughtful about what we put out there to our community. So that's coming. But since we are briefly on the topic, I want to urge you to reconsider throwing away that jury summons that you get in the mail. Thank you so much for joining us, members of the jury, as always. Stay connected. Please join and follow us on all social media platforms. Have a wonderful night. And JoEllyn Jones, forever thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Have a wonderful night, everyone.
Good night.